Hey everyone, I'm Luke,
And I'm Max.
and welcome back to the Upside Down Thoughts NASCAR podcast. We're back at you with the Wurth 400 from Texas Motor Speedway. Bringing this one a little bit late as we're trying to get caught back up. Um, but we're going to bring it in right with qualifying, and Carson Hocevar would take the pole, his first pole of his career and the first pole of the season. And he was actually fastest in practice as well. So obviously a super strong car for him today at Texas. And, he's been kicking it on these mile and a half so far this season.
For sure, there's not much to say. If for those of you that have been following along and watching past podcasts or even just the past race earlier in the season, knew that this host of our poll was coming sooner or later because he has just been totally lights out um, on all sides of things with his pit crew. I mean, his driving, putting together a good car with his race engineers. It's really all been there, and he's not the only one on his team that's been fast. I'm gonna go a little further down the starting lineup here, but in fifth, you see his teammate Michael McDowell. So that team's gonna be fast, but I'll let you take what we might call the
For
dark
sure.
side of NASCAR. In second and fourth, you got William Byron and Kyle Larson, the first two Hendrick Chevys.
Of course. Obviously, my pick to win was William Byron, as we mentioned in the last podcast, and he would qualify in second, right where I thought he would be. He's always a threat at Texas. Same with his teammate of Kyle Larson in the five, like you mentioned. Ty Gibbs in sixth with a great qualifying. He hasn't qualified too well this season, but in sixth is super good. And he's been great at Texas as well. Last year more specifically, but Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, two Toyotas, and AJ Allmendinger rounding out the top 10. So another great qualifying from that 16 colleague car, who we've mentioned in the past two or three podcasts. He's really showed his showed light on his team with these qualifying and finishes so far.
Absolutely, but I'm going to go a little further back up the lineup. The two drivers that you kind of skipped on, I'm going to go with the two of Austin Cindric starting in third. He's putting together a great qualifying effort. He's the winner last week at Talladega, so it's a great spot to find himself in back-to-back weeks. And you see another Ford, the Alliance teammate, 21, Josh Berry, Wood Brothers Ford in seventh. And he's been lights out on the 1.5s. He was great at Homestead, won Vegas. So no surprise to see him up there once again.
Of course. Um, and Josh Berry has been super strong at Las Vegas, which is another 1.5, which he won at. So we expected big things from him coming to Texas, and he proved it with his qualifying effort in seventh. But moving down outside the top 10, Alex Bowman, the third Hendrick car in 11th, Chris Buescher, the first RFK car in 12th, and Zane Smith just behind him. So second year in the Cup Series for Zane Smith, and he, right around that playoff bubble in that front row team. So showing a lot of pace and a lot of confidence for that young driver in qualifying in 13th at Texas.
Yeah, this is a good starting spot for him. I don't got a whole lot on this because we'll end up seeing a few more mixed in here. Eric Jones is right behind him. Justin Haley right behind Jones in 15th. So a few kind of outliers laying in the top 15. Got a hot lap down, and you kind of look to see them kind of maintain their spot towards the race, but it's definitely going to be tough when you have guys coming behind them. You got 20 of Christopher Bell right behind him in 16th. The 22 of Chase Briscoe. I'm sorry, in 22nd. The 19 of Chase Briscoe. That car is going to be fast. Ryan Blaney, 24th. Logano, 27th. Elliott, 28th. So, there's a lot of cars to watch out for. And those drivers, if they want to stay where they're at or even move forward, they are going to have to grab a gear and go right off the line.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned Chase Elliott in 29th, last year's winner of Texas. So not the best qualifying effort from him, but he has finished top 20 in every single race so far this season. So you can call him Mr. Consistent, I guess. But I was a little concerned with the qualifying effort from him when I was watching qualifying, but I wasn't really too worried about how he'd do in the race from the stat line I just mentioned.
Yeah, he's got that one Hendrick car that really hasn't been qualifying well at all this year, to be honest. And you mentioned Mr. Consistent. I really don't think it's been hurting him that much.
Right.
He's getting not necessarily the finishes you need because you say, well, he's not in victory lane, is he? Well, no, he's not. But he's getting these finishes, and if you go to look at the playoff standings and look at who your non-winning points leader is, it's going to be that 9 car. So
Hmm.
it's it's kind of interesting to see the haters beat up on him and say, well, you don't deserve that ride. There's a lot of uh, yeah, there's a lot of respect that comes with that number, and to be able to be driving that car and having Elliott as a last name, that's another huge thing. Saying he's got to follow in his father's footsteps. Well, he might not be winning races, but he's getting those consistent finishes. And a lot of people forget, but this guy broke his leg 2 years ago, I believe it was
Yep.
now, and we're so-called playing a sport here where one of the most important limbs of your body is your legs. So this I just see the hate towards him as way too much, and maybe I'm saying that because I'm an Elliott fan and I think the hate's not warranted, but I think he deserves a lot more respect than he gets.
100%. Well said. But finishing off qualifying, Ross Chastain 31st. He's proved it week in week that it does not matter where he qualifies. He's still going to find a way in the top 10, like we mentioned in the past couple podcasts. But Ryan Preece rounding out the RFK cars in 33rd. Ricky Stenhouse in 34th, who's having a great year, just inside that playoff bubble. Jesse Love qualifying with Beard Motorsports in the 62 in 35th. And then we have Cody Ware, SVG, and Fincham rounding out the qualifying order. So not too many surprises for me in the qualifying. Obviously, Hocevar was the main guy we wanted to touch on a little bit, how much speed he had, kind of the whole practice and qualifying sessions.
Right. I see Hocevar as, being the biggest surprise in qualifying. And the fact that we see that as the biggest surprise is kind of goes to show me that there were no surprises in that qualifying, even though besides the fact that it's his first career Cup Series pole. But, it's a great effort from him overall to, kind of throw us off our rockers a little bit. But we mentioned him on the front row. So why not get to the race, the thing he is leading?
For sure. Yeah, and as we start here at Texas, perfect sunny day. Texas always brings, great weather. So track's going to be pretty slick, going to be a lot of movement. But Hocevar and Byron would lead us to the green flag with Cindric behind him. And Hocevar would get out to a nice lead over William Byron through these first couple laps. Byron is a guy who is super, super good on restarts. And, I kind of thought on the outside lane, he'd be the one to, maybe jump out a little bit. He likes the top lane here. But Hocevar would cement himself with, over a second and a half lead on William Byron, in this little green flag run here. So, it's not just the speed in qualifying and practice. He has the speed in the race, which is always, something that as fans we worry about for our favorite drivers. Okay, they have speed in qualifying and practice, but does it carry over the race? And for sure, for our Hocevar, it definitely does, as we see so far.
All right, that's another thing though. Like after qualifying, teams are able to make more changes. As long as it's within the NASCAR's guidelines and gets through pre-race testing. So or pre-race inspection. So I see this as really really impressive for him, and it kind of brings me to another point here. Going back to the Elliott point that we said in qualifying, he qualifies all the way in the back, and you talk about carrying speed over from qualifying. Well, he doesn't carry his speed over, but he improves heavily, which is what allows him to move forward. So that's just another point that I kind of wanted to add on to that previous qualifying stint that we had here at the beginning of this podcast. But moving on from there, a few laps after Hocevar continues to extend his lead, we see Noah Gragson get to the inside of Daniel Suarez looking for a pass, and thing just got away from him, and he'll slide up the racetrack. Thank goodness for the very wide turns 1 and 2 at Texas. He will just basically slide forever without hitting a wall, and will end up coming back down to the apron with not much damage except 4 blown tires.
Yeah, glad you mentioned the wide turns at Texas. Kind of looked like he was just trying to pass Suarez. Kind of got in the gas a little bit too far in the middle of the corner and spun that thing around. Looked really loose even before the wreck happened, but he was about to save it. And as soon as he touched the brakes, that thing went right around. So, he'd have flat tires, have to go back to pit road, but no damage on the outer body of the car for Gragson. Just kind of an unfortunate wreck for him in 20th, kind of middle of the pack where he qualified. So, not much else to say about that. It's kind of a standard wreck for Texas, a single car spin.
Right. It's that typical, we say, quote unquote, what we call an arrow wreck at Texas. We saw a bunch last year in the race that Elliott won, and they're very common here. As I would, I don't know, I'm not a physicist when it comes to this idea, but I would say when you have cars that come this tight together around a turn, with not a whole lot of banking, but real hot temperatures on the track, so the cars are going to be all over the place in the first place, not a lot of grip. And that air is basically just going to pull those cars right around when they get to each other's rear quarter panels. So you mentioned it, but it's a very common wreck that we will continue to see here throughout the day at Texas, as well as another spot that we're going to be seeing later in the podcast. Exiting turn 4, there's a bump in the middle lane where if you do not lift, you will go around exiting turn 4.
Yeah, for sure. But we have to caution him out. So this is a really weird kind of thing that happened during the pit cycle. But all the lead lap cars would come in, except Hamlin, who's in 7th position. And I don't know if this was a miscommunication. It seems like it was, reading kind of the transcript here. But it seems like Hammond was intending to pit, and then he kind of stayed out, kind of against Chris Gale, his crew chief, who was saying pit, pit, pit. And I don't know if it didn't come through the radio or whatever. But if it couldn't get any worse than that, he'd come back down pit road 2 laps later and he would speed. So he'd go to the tail end of the longest line, and a rough start to Texas, and just kind of really weird incident that I've never really seen before.
Yeah, you mentioned radio miscommunication here, and this is a thing where there's 36 at least every week, 36 spotters communicating with their teams every week, and not only that, the cars are all over the track at different times, and your spotters are way up on a spotter stand above the fans. So to have miscommunication here, and then uh, for those that haven't been to a race, or you'll learn that fans actually have the option to get scanners, and you can listen to the radios of the drivers. So to see that miscommunications happening here, and there is radio interference, doesn't surprise me a whole lot. NASCAR in a small spot here, there's a lot of room for possible miscommunication, as you got a lot of radio lines and waves in a small area here, and a lot of stuff can get mixed up real easily.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
it kind of sucks for Hamlin, but it's something that NASCAR has had for quite a few years, and I think that'll be something that'll be very difficult to get rid of. I don't really see that just being a NASCAR thing. I think no matter what sport you try to have radio communication in, it'll never be that easy.
Hey, 100%. It's good points to clear it up. But on the restart, Cindric and Barry would lead us to green. So we'd kind of see Josh Berry point himself in the mix at the 1.5, like I mentioned in qualifying. And we would get kind of our first long green flag run. And these top 4 cars running, they did not spread out at all. They were within, half a second to a second of each other, getting really big runs at Texas down that back stretch. Kind of sending it into these corners, like you mentioned, the super wide 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 even. Even all the way back into 4th and 5th, with Larson and Hocevar battling for 10 laps here, trying to just get every single position. But Cindric and Barry would not break away from each other. They would battle for like 10 to 20 laps, um, switching positions, finding what lane their car runs better in, figuring out the aero package, and clean air and dirty air and what works better for them. So it's super, super cool to see at Texas. Obviously, the 1.5 mile package in the next gen car brings it. It's my favorite package out of all of them. So not really a surprise that they were, running this close.
Absolutely, and while you're talking about the race up front, I'm gonna kind of go to the race in the back, because as even though there's cars that might be a lot slower in the back, you cannot count them out, because we mentioned a penalty for the 11 team, Denny Hamlin, for speeding on pit road. But, your guy, Ryan Blaney, he also had a penalty, so he was starting tail end on this green flag run after the Gregson spin. And, they are both up 10 positions each off the restart. So to see them as the biggest movers moving towards the middle and end of this stage is really interesting to see, to know that their cars do have speed, but they just made mistakes on pit road.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot to even mention Blaney's penalty. Glad you mentioned that. Um, Boston Cindric would lay 41 laps so far, the most at Texas in the previous years with the next gen car for Penske. So super good to see for Penske there. But as soon as you mentioned Denny Hamlin and all his problems, well, kaboom goes that engine. He would catch fire in 1 and 2 and slide all the way down into the apron, and his day would for sure be done. And this is really interesting because usually with an engine failure, you kind of see that blue smoke like we were talking about coming out of the exhausts or the front of the back of the car. But this thing just it had blue smoke, yeah, but just caught fire immediately. Exhaust fire flew out of the exhaust, out of the hood, and yeah, I've never seen an engine failure like this in the next gen car yet.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. It's really scary, actually. You mentioned not seeing a fire like this in the next gen cars yet, and you're absolutely right. We've seen fire under the hood from the engine, but this car virtually looked from the outside like it had no damage. We kind of see him kind of nursing it around the apron. We're like, oh, maybe he has a flat tire. Maybe the engine's blown. There's always that possibility, and then it just kind of, put it simply, it blew up. And that thing, it really did. The engine blew up so immediately and really fast and powerfully that it spun him out too, which
Hmm.
is something you don't typically see. The drivers are able to typically keep their car straight on a blown engine, and
Right.
even with the engine being blown, even just glided around back to the pits, or at least down to the apron. And this car was kind of cruising down the back stretch for quite a little while until AMR was able to get out to him, and they had to help Hamlin out because that cockpit was filled with smoke in a hurry, and he certainly couldn't see where he was going. And we're lucky that that 11 car was going straight, because there's no way Denny knew it was. And if that car wasn't going straight, we could have seen something very similar to Jordan Anderson back in the Truck Series at Talladega a few years ago, where we see his engine blow and he spins down towards the infield and thinks he's just going straight, right, and he's trying to get out, and he was basically going head on into the infield wall. So to see that Hamlin got real lucky here in my eyes, and that he didn't end up in the same situation as Jordan Anderson and unable to race for even months, this is really lucky for Hamlin to be able to walk away from this one.
Yeah, and I feel like it wasn't touched on a lot, um, even in the Fox broadcasting. With that, with all that fire, I'm sure his helmet air intake was just filled with black smoke, and the car, he can't see where he's going. As soon as that car gets filled with black smoke, the windshield fogs up. Um, you're not even gonna hold onto the steering wheel at that point. You're just trying to figure out what's going on and how to get out of your car. And he can't tell if he's stopped or going 40 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour, and if he's heading into a wall or where he even is, because like you mentioned, that car just kind of snapped as soon as the engine took over. So yeah, and it took him a decent amount of time to get out of the car, but thankfully he was perfect. He was good. He mentioned on his podcast that it was a little scary, um, but he got out with some help with the AMR safety team, who got out there super quickly to help him out. And he came out of the infield care center and was checked up and okay, and was interviewed. So all good things for this next gen car. Kept him safe, and he got out. Thankfully, he got out as quick as he did.
Yeah, you mentioned all good with the next gen car here, but that kind of brings me up to another thing that I was kind of interested in touching on. And that we've seen a lot of blown engines this year, and we're seeing these blown engines from top of the line drivers. We've seen Blaney blow multiple, and now this is Hamlin. I'm not as surprised here, and I'm not. I don't mean to offend any fans that might be fans of, the kind of lower ranked drivers. But we're seeing big names that are going up in smoke from these engines, and I'm kind of interested in seeing if this is an engine problem or if this is something with the next gen car.
Um,
It's just a very interesting kind of topic here that has not really been touched on by any personalities or even NASCAR in general with the whole R&D.
yeah, I kind of have a point for Hamlin why, maybe this engine blew up. I'm not too sure. Like we mentioned with Blaney at Homestead, I think it was just because he was running so hard and he didn't need to be. But here, Hamlin has always liked to use tape on that front grille to try to get the fastest car and try to help him with aero, and
Downforce.
try to warm those brakes up. Because at Texas, you have to use a little bit of brake depending on what line you're running. So he does like to use a lot of tape on that front grille, which does prevent a lot of cool air from getting in the engine intake. So could it have something to do with that? Yes. I don't know how much tape he used on the pit stop. I just know he did. Um, you know, I don't know that it would cause this big of an engine explosion. Um, but there's a lot of factors I can take in. It was a super hot day. Obviously, that definitely was not the case for this big of an engine explosion. But there could have been multiple factors that we don't know about, and it could have been just the setup of his car, and where he was running on the track. Um, he was running in the back, like we mentioned with the penalty. So a lot of factors, I think, and Hamlin's super aggressive when he's always in the back of the pack, so he could be an overrunning the car, but still, I feel like this is even if he was running as hard as the car could, I just don't feel like this should have happened in this car.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned all the factors because for a lot of these things, I kind of agree with you, and there's no one culprit. You can't point at, ECR and say, "Hey, it's their engines, they made a mistake," or you can't point at Chris Gale and the 11 team and the race engineer and say, "Hey, you guys need to tune this back so that this doesn't happen." So I think it definitely could be the the fact that there are a lot of different things contributing to an explosion like this. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. But moving
For
on from
sure.
here, uh we get back to the green flag, and no later do we do that, we see another car go around, and this one, it's off of the bump that I mentioned earlier. It's Chase Briscoe going around, and he will get into Riley Herbst. Herbst will make a nice save. He'll continue on, and Briscoe will end up in the outside wall after overcorrecting to not spin into the infield.
Yeah, and this is an interesting wreck that I'm gonna like to talk about because at Texas, it's not a super difficult track to run. Uh, just starting out with these fresh tires that they have, but there's a little section on the track out of four where there's a little bit of a hump. It's not really noticeable if you're just looking at the track, but when you're driving, you can 100% feel it. And you kind of have to lift out of the gas, especially if you're on the outside lane. It's a little bit bigger up there. Um, but and it will send your car around easily if you're full throttle and turning that car with the because the drivers are gonna have that wheel a little bit turned over that bump. So I think he was just running hard, trying to get past Riley Herbst, spun him around. He tagged like the back of Herbst, like you mentioned. And this is a wreck that we're gonna see quite a bit moving forward in the race. But for those that you don't know, there's a little bit of a hump where there's a tunnel underneath the track that goes right there. So that's kind of why he wrecked, I think, in my opinion. If anyone was having a little bit of confusion about that.
Right. Yeah, all good points there. But moving on from there, this I wanted to mention a little earlier, and it was that Tyler Reddick was moving forward right before Hamlin blew up, and he had restarted sixth after the Gregson spin way back on lap 20, and he was all the way up to second by the time Hamlin blew up. So he's a name that's definitely going to have his name, or he's going to have his name thrown in the hat here. For possibly the end of stage one and even stage two and possibly the race here. So I kind of just wanted to touch on him a little bit there, but this was something that you had mentioned before the podcast had started. On lap 90, we're going to see Christopher Bell pit with a little bit of a possible safety violation here, and he's actually going to have a crew member get in his car here to fix a helmet hose.
Yeah, this was super interesting when I was watching. I remember this kind of moment very clear. If you don't know, there's a little bit of a helmet hose that connects to the back of the driver's helmet, which blows cool air into the driver's face, so they stay cooled down and not pass out. But I don't know how, but it came undone, and a lot of the times you see drivers take it off when they win or when they're getting out of the car, but you cannot put this thing back on by yourself, especially when you're strapped in. So a crew member had to take off the right side window panel and jump in and reattach. So he'd lose a bunch of spots on pit road, and this is the first time I've seen this in any race that I've ever watched. So I don't. Yeah, I'd like to know how it came off. Not really getting any idea on how.
Yeah, it's just an overall real interesting situation. You mentioned it's something that you've never seen, so certainly the same for me. And we see a lot of safety violations on pit road penalties. Well, this is something that's not directly a penalty, but you certainly have to pit for this because this would be, as I mentioned earlier, this is a safety violation. So it's a real weird scenario to see here for the 20 team, but moving on from there, we have yet another restart where Josh Berry and Kyle Larson will lead us to green.
Yeah, and Josh Berry and Kyle Larson, just as you wanted to mention those, though Josh Berry, Kyle Larson, Tyler Reddick, who we've all mentioned in this top five in the restart, are all the last three winners on 1.5. So can definitely understand why they're up here on the restart. And you mentioned Tyler Reddick a few moments ago, so he would be battling with Austin Cindric for that third position as we move into the restart. But Josh Berry has led 35 laps today, so the second most, right behind Cindric with 41, and he would bring his total laps led to 163. So this marks only the second time that Wood Brothers team has gotten over 150 laps led, and we're only was this a not even sure 13th race of the season or 12th,
I
somewhere
don't even
around
think
there,
we're
as we're
that
a little
far.
far behind. Yeah, I don't know, 10th or 11th, somewhere around there. But I feel like we're just jinxing him, even though the race has already happened. But just as quickly as I mentioned his name, he'd hit that bump out of four and completely spin his car around in the lead. Just heartbreaking, and it would destroy that left side of the car, knock that wheel, knock that wheel off out of center, and destroy the wheelbase. So his day would be over as almost as quick as it started, with coming out in lap 125. So just super, super frustrating for Josh Berry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real shame for this 21 team. You just mentioned they're having such a great year, so to see something like this happen is a real shame. But I want to mention here something on the NASCAR side of things. This is a really, really interesting spin because we saw this spin a few years ago with the 48 car of Alex Bowman, and you might already know where I'm going with this. And it's that
Hmm.
he had this exact same spin. And do you know what the result when he got out of that car and was checked out in the care center? What his
I
result was?
do. He had a major, major concussion that would end his season, with Noah Gragson coming in and racing for him.
Right. So it's really interesting to see Josh Berry here have pretty much the exact same hit and to get out of the car and be absolutely fine. And, I love this. This is great improvement by NASCAR. And this is proof that when things are really happening to drivers, they are taking them into consideration. And although NASCAR isn't perfect with everything they do, this is something that they are certainly right on. And it's something that they are doing a really, really great job of, taking care of, making sure their drivers are as safe as possible in those race cars. And since this Gen 7 car was released 4 years ago, they have made a ton of progress with this car. As we really haven't seen an injury since, I think it was Bowman. He might have been the last one, or
Yeah, super, super good points.
yeah.
Um,
So to
Go
to
ahead.
see to see this improvement over this time is just really great. We have Ryan Preece, who had his horrible flip at Daytona, back in that August, and to see him get out with just black eyes, that that is just that is the prime example right there that these cars are incredibly safe compared to how they used to be, and NASCAR deserves a whole lot of credit here.
Yeah, and for some people that might be were watching the race and thinking, "Oh, that was just a light spin." If that was 3 years ago, Josh Berry would not have been getting out of the car under his own will. He had been right to the hospital with a head injury, just because of how the cars were. Super, super. In like 2022, the car was so stiff. Whenever it would hit the wall, especially in the back end, as we saw with Kurt Busch in the same year, who would have a career-ending injury, um, it just would not bend or flex or break or contract. Um, the car would be so stiff. It's kind of like a bicycle helmet. You want it to cave in a little bit so your head doesn't, bounce off the concrete or whatever. Want to have a little bit of flex. So they made a ton of changes with the metal in the car and some of the support points to make them a little bit more fragile, so they contract easier and cushion the driver's head. They have a lot of protective stuff like the Hans device, but this is not going to protect you from that kind of impact. So, ton of good changes from NASCAR for this next gen car, and they're continuing, every single year to make super super good improvements for driver safety.
Yeah, absolutely. We made a lot of great points there, and it's something that needs to be put out and spread because not a whole lot of people know that. And uh, NASCAR has a lot of their own problems, but for the fact that they have this right and a lot of people don't believe they do, it's it's just something that needs to be known by the public eye and NASCAR fans. From us avid NASCAR fans, we have been able to realize that NASCAR is right, and they have a right to deserve their time here being correct. So, but moving on from there, we see yet another restart, and it's going to be Todd Gilliland, who did not pit after the Josh Berry spin, and he will go into turn one with Kyle Larson on his outside.
Yeah, and a very, very good strategy call, in my opinion, for front row with Todd Gilliland, and getting him that track position. But Reddick and Hocevar will be battling for third. The two guys we've mentioned all day. And even Ryan Preece is up here, who did a little bit of a mixed stop with Busher, and they were battling for the top five. But Ryan Blaney was who suffered the pit penalty, which I forgot to mention in lap 22, super early in the race. He finally has found himself in the top 10 yet again, a little bit in the middle of this race. So he definitely has the pace for this kind of closing laps of the race. But Kyle Larson, he would extend his lead over Reddick as Reddick would get clear of Hocevar for the lead. So um, kind of the first little Hendrick lead we've seen from Larson. As we mentioned, they were at all pretty good qualifying positions. But as quickly as we mentioned, Chris Buescher, unfortunately, his tire would explode and the debris caution would come out as the tire actually came off of his car. So unfortunate stuff, as he kind of won a green flag run towards the end of stage two, but the caution would come out.
Yeah, I really see nothing crazy here. I just see nothing but really a blown tire, and this is what I want to be seeing from NASCAR on blown tires. The carcass falls off, rolls up the racetrack, whatever. It's not a tire, so it's not going to get hit and it's not going to go flying into the grandstands. It's going to get run over, and nothing's going to happen to the car except maybe a little bit of splitter damage. But
Yeah.
that's on the driver to be able to avoid, and the spotter calling out that it is there. They are visible, so not a whole lot going on here. Glad to see the rest of the wheel stay together and to be able to throw a new tire on here. It's good to see that NASCAR maybe made improvement here as well since Las Vegas, because Las Vegas, I think we spent half of that podcast, if not more, talking about tires going everywhere.
Oh
So
yeah, for sure.
to see this happen is really good, and that will bring us to the end of stage two under caution, where Larson will win it, followed by Reddick, Bowman, Preece, and Wallace to round out the top five going into the final stage.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bubba Wallace, who didn't mention a lot in stage two. He would get a top five, and he's obviously one of his best tracks, in my opinion, as Texas, as he has a win here. But moving through all the pit stops and everything, and everyone getting their wave rounds and free passes and all that, um, William Byron would lead the restart for the first time today since the opening lap with Chase Elliott on his outside. So a Hendrick 1-2 to lead us. But as soon as we mentioned Bubba Wallace, off the restart on the back stretch, he would kind of get overrun by, I'm not even really sure, kind of like the 4 car and 16. They were all jumped up together, and I think the 4 car kind of just ran into Bubba Wallace and spun him out, and then Wallace tagged the 4 and hit Alex Bowman as well in the 48 on the outside. So just a kind of the big one at Texas, if you want to call it that. Just a really kind of weird wreck. that I couldn't really see a whole lot of from Fox, but a super unfortunate wreck for Bubba Wallace.
Yeah, this is a really strange crash. We're still getting up to speed here. Everyone's packed real tight together, and we're firing into turn 3 here, and we're actually not even in turn 3. And Wallace almost just gets a little squirrely on his own. You mentioned maybe a little contact from his sides. I didn't exactly
Yeah,
see that from the angles I saw. I saw maybe more contact from the 22 behind him, but nothing that's really horrible from the 22 here, or completely out of his right to be able to do so. It's a real weird one, but he's gonna spin to the inside and collect a lot of cars, the 4, the 16, the 48, and AJ Allmendinger in the 16. He's gonna get a little bit of air here when he runs into the 48, who's up against the wall, and he just makes a bizarre crash look even weirder. As this crash, I feel like it started halfway down the backstretch and didn't end until we were almost exiting turn 4. Just a very, very strange accident, and I don't got a whole lot more on it unless you do.
yeah, I think you were right. As I'm watching kind of replay back with the 22, it kind of looks like he just ran over Bubba Wallace as Bubba was loose off of his nose, and just Joey just kind of plowed through him. But yeah, I 100% agree with all the points you made. But moving on, Byron would still lead Chase Elliott, same 1-2 position, but Byron would clear Elliott into the corner, and Elliott would kind of slide up, and he would drop all the way back to fifth. So, unfortunate restart for him. I kind of looked like Byron just took the air off him and kind of almost self cleared a little bit. So it kind of sucks for Elliott, who's obviously won here last year, super strong on 1.5s this season so far. But Gibbs and Reddick would be battling the two Toyotas we've mentioned all day. And here comes Ryan Blaney as he would shoot down with Hocevar and Reddick and make a 3 wide pass, get him up to the top 5 for the first time today. A super, super strong move, and out of nowhere, as we mentioned, he was in the top 5 coming back from that penalty in stage 1, but he would show his car coming into the ending of the race.
For sure, this is absolutely huge. You mentioned all the way in the back from the penalty, and to be able to drive all the way from deep 30s all the way up to the top 5. Are you kidding me? You can only imagine, how good Ryan felt in that race car, and to have a car. I'm gonna kind of take a shot at you Blaney fans here for a car that hasn't blown up yet. But it's really great to see Blaney finally having a good run for a driver that needs these and is able to put up these runs and just hasn't been able to do it the last few weeks.
Yeah, 100%. But moving on slowly with that, as we move through the green flag run all the way up to lap 200, we would have another caution as William Byron, or as everyone was kind of coming into the green flag pit cycle. Um, but the caution would come out with kind of lap 221 ish, as anyone cycles through. With not John Hunter Nemechek leading us as the caution flew out, as he was trying to kind of wait for a caution. He was kind of in the middle of the pack, not really having a good day. So very, very fortunate for him, as he would be able to gain a ton of positions as, everyone would have to gain their lap back and everything. But um, just trying to find. Okay.
Right. I mean, I think he ends up being the leader here. Nemechek does after a spin from Jesse Love, who
Right.
I see nothing here except a rookie mistake. He's doing the same thing as Nemechek here, trying to stretch it, seeing if he can get a lucky break. He's actually on the lead lap here, where he's gotten, I believe, 2 free passes already today. So to see him give Nemechek a break here and really say, he and give Nemechek this advantage, he's just not able to hold on to it here out of turn 2. And I see nothing to this except, possibly getting tired, not used to the Cup car. It's just a spin to the inside.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say on it either, but um, you know, moving it on, Blaney would still show his speed in the 12 as he was being second as the caution would come out again as Michael McDowell um was the leader, and he would show super, super strong speeds on the restarts as he would move in the top five. And as soon as the caution come out, he would take a two tire stop. So a super super bold move for Spire, but they haven't had a win yet this season, and they just had Hocevar on the pole. So I love this pitch stop strategy call for McDowell, and leading into the restart, I was super excited to see what happened with him and Logano on his outside.
For sure, but no later does Larson bring us to green with McDowell on his outside. 3 laps later, we're going to see that bump claim another victim. Here, this time it's the 8 of Kyle Busch, and he's going to spin down through the infield, and he's going to have a super close call with that Sonny D number 47 of Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who's going to do a great job to just get away from almost looks like this Sharks versus Minnows here, as Kyle Busch is basically going straight at Stenhouse to almost hook him here. And could have put Stenhouse back through traffic here and caused a really bad accident, but just a great job and evasive maneuver here overall by Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned the great move by, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who we haven't mentioned a whole lot today. But as soon as Bush would spin to that inside, Ricky would get off the gas and kind of swerve his car and avoid him super well by not running into Kyle Busch, and they were still going almost full speed. So a super good move by Ricky Stenhouse to keep his car alive and not run into Kyle Busch, who was spinning in the inside.
Right, super heads up overall, and us as normal human beings, it really goes to show you that these NASCAR drivers are a special breed of their own, and that they need that reaction time that us average humans we might think we have, but it really goes to show you that they are athletes and it cannot be hated upon. So it's a really great move overall by Stenhouse there, but no later do we see another restart with a Larson McDowell front row. Yet again, we'll see Hocevar run up the track. Almost looks like he puts Ryan Preece in the wall after getting tight exiting turn 2. And he's going to turn himself across Ryan Preece's nose, almost going airborne. I don't know if you have a little bit to kind of touch in on that crash. It's a really weird one here. Seeing
Yeah.
Hocevar almost go up on on his left side tires here as both right side tires are off the ground.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot on this. I was watching intently at this point. It kind of looked like Priest or Hostafar just came up the track a little bit, kind of almost hooked himself a little bit on Priest, and then like the back of his car just lifted off the ground almost. It was so weird. I was just kind of heard Mike Joy, go whoa, and then just kind of saw the wreck play out from there. I don't really know what caused this. Don't have a whole lot to say on this wreck, but just super super almost scary a little bit. It almost looked like he was about to go over.
For sure, I mentioned it's just a result, I think of bad air for Hocevar here and running up the track into Priest with all that traffic. Hocevar started out front, so didn't have to deal with that bad air, and as soon as he's back in it here, he seems to struggle and wreck his race car. But I don't put that exactly on him. It's the first time he's back here all race, and you mentioned this being a really scary crash, but yet again, I think NASCAR does a great job here and makes sure he's safe in there. He gets
Sure.
out under his own power and brings us to yet again another restart. Larson McDowell again, as Blaney, who had passed McDowell prior to the Hocevar spin, will choose to restart on the inside of Road 2. I don't know if you have anything you want to mention there. It's,
A little
it's
bit.
kind of interesting to see a driver basically relinquish the front row to say, I'd rather have the inside than the outside of the front row.
Yeah, I just gonna as a Blaney fan myself, he was horrible on restarts. Like the worst I've ever seen from him in the time that I've been watching NASCAR. On the outside, he was useless. He was getting the doors blown off of him, every single restart. So I absolutely love the move going inside, maybe following Larson, seeing what he's doing on restarts, but he could not. I don't know if it was the car or what he was doing, but he was not good on restarts on the outside, not even leading a line in general. Just, couldn't really take a push from the guys behind him on the outside. So I think he didn't really have a choice but to go inside and follow Larson.
Right, and I'd almost rather be on the inside at most of these 1.5 restarts. You can almost poke your nose in for a possible 3 wide on the inside, which I think is definitely his goal here. Going to the green as he is going to be able to do that as we see the green flag here again with Larson and McDowell. And he's going to poke his nose in, get to the inside of Larson, and he's going to be able to slide up in front of McDowell, but not quite in front of Larson, as Larson will get the run off of turn 2, but 2 laps again, we will see another caution as cautions continue to breed cautions. Brad Keselowski loose off of turn 2, the same spot as Hocevar, but instead of continuing to go up to the track and gain into someone up towards the wall, he spins down towards the infield, where we will see a multi-car crash. Ty Dillon, Cole Custer, Kyle Busch, and Austin Cindric are all checked up and will spin towards the inside wall as well. Nothing a whole lot here except just a car getting loose, everyone having to check up behind, and people basically getting run over and spun out.
Yeah, not a whole much for me there. It's kind of similar to the Wallace wreck where, one car gets loose and, everyone kind of freaks out behind them and causes, a multi-car incident. So super unfortunate for the guys, as late as we are into this race, but don't really have too much other than that to say on this wreck.
Yeah, and yet again, we will try this whole green thing, hopefully for the final time. And we see lap 253, McDowell Blaney front row as Blaney says, you know what? Inside worked, but, I just don't think it's going to be enough. So I'm going to try the front row again. Maybe I'm going to have a shot now with this being Michael McDowell instead of, who might be a legend at this point, Kyle Larson. To see Blaney take the outside, he's kind of regained his confidence, but we will have no shot at a green flag run as one lap after McDowell leads us to green, Tyler Reddick is clipped by the 99 of Daniel Suarez going into turn 1 and goes for a long slide. At the same spot, Noah Gragson went and will make an amazing save to not have a whole lot of damage here, and he will be able to join the back of the pack. But, the whole point of this Reddick thing here is, it brings out another caution, and Michael McDowell is going to continue to be our leader here with about 20 laps to go.
Yeah, and you mentioned Michael McDowell. Just wanted to touch on him a little bit, and he's been leading this and been on the front row, this entire time. So he knows it's go time. Obviously, he wants this to stay green so he can run the laps. But super super good save from Tyler Reddick, like you mentioned. He would slide for a long time. But Michael McDowell knows it's go time, and he's. I don't want to say he has to win to get in the playoffs. It's gonna be tough if he doesn't. Obviously, you have more than 16 winners. He's gonna have to, but he knows that a win would do a whole lot for the Spire team and obviously for the 71 team in general.
Yeah, and this is a car that is not just up there by luck or pit rotation by lucky pit rotation. This is a car that's up there on pure speed. You mentioned us say that a lot. What is pure speed? Pure speed is when you have the ability to run in that top 5, top 3, top 10, whatever it is, all day. That you're not cruising in the back. You get a lucky break by staying out on a pits when everyone else pits and shotgunning to the lead. But this is a car that is fast. It's setting down those laps and able to run up with the big dogs. Your Kyle Larson, your William Byron, Hamlin when he's in the race. So to see this car up there and is a real threat to win this race, it's going to be a real interesting ending to this race. But as Reddick will rejoin the pack at the back, McDowell's going to put his foot to the ground and lead us to green again with Ryan Blaney on his outside. And Ryan Blaney will get a big run down the back stretch, but Michael McDowell is not going to give up and will stay side by side, exiting turn 4. But here comes Joey Logano creeping up behind Ryan Blaney.
Yeah.
And we'll sit 1, 2, 3, McDowell, Blaney, Logano.
Yeah, and you mentioned Joey Logano. If there's one guy late in a race who I do not want to see behind me, and that's the 22 of Joey Logano, especially at Texas where he's so strong. As soon as I saw Logano enter this top 3 battle with McDowell and Blaney, I knew he was going to be a factor. So just watch out for him as we move into the end of the race for sure.
Yeah, and no later do we mention Logano in third. We are going to see him pass Blaney, and he's going to get up to second in 1 and 2 on lap 259. And a few laps later, McDowell's going to slide high, exiting 4, and Logano's going to say, I see you, buddy. You are not driving off. And it's going to be a real race to the finish here with Logano right on McDowell's bumper. And about 2 laps later, McDowell is going to see Logano dive down to the inside on the backstretch, and McDowell is going to make an absolutely... I I say outrageous, but more hilarious block here. And it's not hilarious making fun of McDowell. This just goes to show you how much a win would mean to him and this team. And some people, if you're Joey Logano or Paul Wolf or a Logano fan, you might say, "Well, this block's so egregious. It's ridiculous." Well, I see this as just throwing everything on the line.
Yeah, it's interesting. We kind of have different opinions on this, and I understand it from McDowell's point of view. He has to go for a block, block his heart out or whatever. But this is a little bit pushing the limits, in my opinion. I understand blocking someone like this, but almost going onto the apron to block someone is kind of crazy. You still have laps left. You can still beat him on the outside. You have the speed. Um, so I get it. I don't think he was trying to run him down that low to block him. I certainly hope not. But obviously Logano was not the most happiest, and I'm not saying anything bad about McDowell. He's had an incredible season so far, but just a little bit pushing the boundaries of a block, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and it's an all fair opinion to have. McDowell kind of has this reputation right now that he's been struggling with his blocks. Talladega last year, he's leading, coming through the tri-oval to the checkered flag, and throws that same block in Keselowski, and since it's 40
Mhm.
miles an hour faster, he ends up wrecking himself. So he's this isn't the first time he's been in this position, and he's a guy that you know I say wants to win. Of course, every driver wants to win, but he's not in that position a lot. And when he's up there and has a real chance to win at one of the biggest original NASCAR tracks, is Texas is that typical oval, that intermediate 1.5 mile oval. He's never able to compete here, so to really have the chance to win, he's gonna throw these blocks, and whether Logano's going to be happy about it or not, Logano is going to get the better of him and is going to get to the inside, entering turn 3. But no later does Logano get the better of McDowell. McDowell is going to throw everything exiting turn 2 a lap later and is going to overcorrect after nearly spinning the inside and is going to overcorrect hard into the outside wall, bringing out a caution with 1 to go, meaning we will have overtime.
Yeah, and it's just so unfortunate, McDowell. You could tell he used up a ton of his stuff battling Logano for that time period, and as soon as he loses that spot, Ryan Blaney would um, you know, obviously pounce on him for that second position and kind of wash up in front of him. And with McDowell, how you know little laps left on the tires that they could handle, kind of cut the air a little bit off him, as he mentioned over the radio, and just spun him to the inside. So just heartbreaking for that team and for that driver. He wants to win so badly this season, and for the Spire team, who we covered so heavily. And I'm hoping it happens. I really hope it does.
For sure. They definitely deserve one. This team has, seems like they've spilled their hearts and blood and emotion and tears and everything into this race team this year. And, they're not getting that result, but they are getting the runs that they won. And, every time, even though one of these cars is falling out of the race via wreck or, mechanical failure, whatever it is, that crew chief is saying, "Great job today, bud. We are going to get them next week." So it's really
Mhm.
just great effort week after week for that team. But moving on, we see the overtime restart where it'll be a Logano, Blaney, Penske front row. Logano will end up clearing, exiting turn 2, when Blaney will get way too high and almost out of the groove, and Hamlin and Chastain will slip by on the inside as Blaney will inevitably fall back to 4th. Well, while all that's happening, Logano will end up driving away and winning by just under half a second over Ross Chastain, who would get around Denny Hamlin in 3 and 4 on the final lap, and uh, will allow us to say that Joey Logano was the Wurth 400 winner at Texas Motor Speedway. And, some people might not like it, some people may love it. But this was Joey Logano's race all along. Everyone should have known with how this race was playing out that we probably were going to see the 22 in victory lane. I'll let you
Mhm.
go a little further on that to, kind of tell the people what I mean by that.
Yeah, excuse my lack of emotion. I'm not the biggest Joey Logano fan in the world, but Everyone used to call Kevin Harvick the closer. Well, I think we got to start calling Logano the closer. He comes in these races and just somehow wins them. Only leading 7 laps. He's really not in the top 5 all day until the last stage. Wins in overtime, kind of steals one, like we were mentioning a couple weeks ago with Hamlin at Darlington. But that's kind of what it takes with the playoff format. You got to be there at the end. It's not where you start, it's where you finish, especially in the playoffs. So, this is kind of the name of the game with Logano. He finds ways to win. He understands how this system works, and he takes advantage of it. So, you can't be too mad at the guy. Did everything he had to do and came out with the win. So, he will be locked into the playoffs for sure, coming into the fall. So, it's always a guy you got to watch out for. You can't throw Joey Logano under the rug. He's always going to be there at the end. So, yeah, excuse my lack of emotion, but just kind of how it is.
But I think that allows us to go into our next segment that always follows the ending of the race, and that being the end results with Logano. We see him bringing it home. We already talked about this, and this is what I wanted to mention. This was my pick to win the race. He was nowhere to be seen the whole race. I'm going to get a little, more emotion here, but this was Ross Chastain coming up one spot short. He was my, pick to win, and I might have a whole lot of faith, saying, Ross Chastain's going to go out and win it at Texas. But to see him bring this thing home second, what a day for that Trackhouse #1 team.
Oh, for sure. But kind of moving down the list, Ryan Blaney in third, and some would say obviously a super good day in third, but he had the multiple chances to win this race for sure. But I just don't think he had the car to do it. And definitely didn't have the pace on the restart to do it. So third, he obviously wanted to win, but he'll definitely take a top 5. And Kyle Larson, fourth, very good day for him. And Eric Jones rounding out the top 5, who we didn't mention at all this podcast, just snuck his way in there off the overtime restart, gained a bunch of track positions. So a great day for that Legacy Motor Club 43.
Absolutely. That's a team that absolutely needed a great day. Nemechek got lucky with the pit stop earlier in the race, and then will end up running out on tires as he would not pit coming to the green flag after the Jesse Love spin. But, this is a much needed day for, not only Legacy in general, but for this 43 team. But I wanted to go back to fourth. You mentioned Kyle Larson and Ryan Blaney, who was in third, who was really struggling on the restarts. It was kind of the same for Kyle Larson, who, had the great long run speed, but it wasn't a long run race. And it really goes to show you that the short run cars like that 22 of Joey Logano, they will capitalize on the long run cars like Kyle Larson. And in a race where there's, a lot of cautions, and you can say cautions breed cautions. And it really goes to show you the difference there. But moving on from there, we see yet another great day from the 47 of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. after his evasive maneuver from the wrecking Kyle Busch to not being talked about another time this race. To see him end up bringing this home sixth silently is just a great day for him.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's what he needs to do. Right inside that playoff bubble, just keep having consistent top 10 finishes. So, and just, mentioned behind him, Austin Dillon, just outside that playoff bubble in kind of around the 20th points positions. He would get a great day in 7th. One of his better tracks, just, mentioning his name for the right reasons this season. So super, super, super cool to see that 3-car running decently well. But John Herman Nemechek, the other Legacy Motor Club 42, would get 8th, another top 10 for him this season. His name has been trending in our ones to watch over these couple races. So super cool to see him in the top 10 with Christopher Bell and Daniel Suarez rounding out the top 10. So Suarez, having a bit of a lackluster season to this point, gets a much needed top 10 for that Trackhouse team. And they would both get top 10s, as you mentioned, Ross Chastain in second.
Yeah, and moving further down the list, we see Todd Gilliland and Ty Dillon having both great days. Ty Dillon racing for Colleague. That's a name that we have not heard a lot this year at all. So a 12th place finish for him is absolutely great. And then we see 2 Hendrick Chevys, William Byron 13th and Chase Elliott in 16th. Moving down the list a little further, We have the 17 of Chris Buescher in 18th and the 8 of Kyle Busch in 20th.
Yep, and moving down further than that, 21 of Tyler Reddick and a 23 of Gibbs. Ty Gibbs, excuse me. So not the best days, but obviously we had Reddick have that long slide. So he managed to salvage almost a top 20 finish. 22nd for SVG. Austin Cindric back in 25th for Penske. And Michael McDowell would end up finishing 26th. So like we mentioned, a heartbreaking day for that 71 team.
Yeah, for sure. But, something that's not as heartbreaking for a team that might not have had a great finish as well, talking about Team Spire, would be the 77 of Carson Hocevar. He had our Xfinity fastest lap, and I believe it was right at the start of the race. So to see him put that 77 right out front early after qualifying on the pole, put together a great lap, and even though he didn't have the great finish after nearly going airborne off the front of Ryan Preece, who just seems to be, if you're in the vicinity of Ryan Preece, don't be afraid to take air because, that guy just doesn't have a great track record no matter where we seem to go.
Yeah. But rounding out this finishing positions, Chase Briscoe in 27th, Brad Keselowski 28th, another poor finish for him. Man, just cannot catch a break, and he's really, really got to pick it up. But moving on, Cody Ware 30th, Jesse Love, who we mentioned had that spin, he would finish 31st. So getting a lot of laps for that Beard Motorsports team to get some good information back to them. Josh Berry, who we mentioned, spin in the lead, he would finish 32nd. And everyone that DNF'd past him, Bo Wallace, Noah Gragson, Bowman, Allmendinger, Fincham, and Hamlin would finish out the order. So overall, a great Texas race, in my opinion. You know, a solid overtime finish with Logano winning. So a good day for NASCAR.
Certainly was, and I believe that this might as well become my segment now. It always seems to be me leading us into this segment. But we will go into our driver picks for Kansas. Yet again, we are in the future, and we know who wins this race already. But we had told each other our picks prior to the race, and I will go first, and I will say that my pick was someone who lost this race by a margin similar to the Kentucky Derby. It's the 17 of Chris Buescher, so close to victory last year. Closest margin of victory in Cup Series history. And I think he's going to, find that extra inch this year, and he's going to be our victor.
Great choice. I was actually debating picking him as well. But I'm going with someone that has been Mr. Consistent, if you remember who that is, if you've been listening hard to this podcast. But I'm going with Chase Elliott. Finished third here last year. Been super good at the 1.5s this season, and Kansas is one of the best 1.5s for that Hendrick team. So looking for him to get his first win of the season for Chase Elliott.
Yeah, it's a great pick there. Can't shut down that pick at all, as he was right there under that blanket in the top 4 coming to the line last year. So 2 great picks going into Kansas, and I hope you all enjoyed this podcast.
Yep, but 1 second, as we have one final little thing to do here. Last week podcast we mentioned how we wanted you guys to ask a little bit of questions, comments, concerns about anything we didn't cover in the previous races. So we actually have one comment here under the Talladega podcast, and it's
yes.
Who would you guys like to see win a race this season in 2025? Good question. Good solid question. I'll let you go first for this one. Good question.
Well, my pick, this is one that, it almost seems obvious and blatant at this point, especially after this Texas race, but gotta go. Your Xfinity fastest lap, that's 77, Carson Hocevar. He's going to get there by the end of this year. I absolutely feel it. They have been so close. They're putting it together. They just need to figure out those finishing touches to make it just through the end of stage 3 and top off that race.
It's a great pick. Obviously, I could go Ryan Blaney here, but that's boring. So I'm going to go with that 19 of Chase Briscoe. I really just want to see him get a win, get his confidence in that 19 team for JGR. I would love to see him win at, maybe a short track. New Hampshire's coming up, and really fit that persona that Truex had. So he's doing a great job, just hasn't got the win yet. But that'll be it for the podcast. If you want to have anything, last comments to add.
I've got nothing. I'll let you put the wrap on it.
All right, guys. As we mentioned, leave any comments, questions, concerns under this podcast. If there's anything we missed or anything you want to ask, And we will catch you guys next time for the Kansas race. I want to thank all you guys for listening, taking time out of your day to hang with us. So we'll see you guys next time.
Have a good one, everyone.